So if you remember back to our copyrights basics lecture, once we fix our copyright or fix our idea, more specifically in a tangible medium of expression, just like magic, we get bestowed the triple DRP. And that happens to individuals regardless of what their publishing affiliation would be. They could be self-published, they can be tied to a songwriter agreement already. But the second that we fix that idea in a tangible medium of expression, we as individuals would receive triple DRP. We'd receive the bundle of rights and all the rights and privileges bestowed to us therein. But what happens when we're a songwriter that's just focused on our creativity and we don't really want to focus time on the business side, or we're kind of naive to what's going on the business side as it relates to the intellectual property that we're creating? Enter the publisher. Now, for most of the class, what we've been talking about are scenarios in which the publisher has been acting on behalf of the songwriter. And in those instances, it's inferred, at least from my standpoint, that the publisher has been granted triple DRP from the intellectual property creator, more specifically in this case, the songwriter. So we're going to have to talk about a couple different things that happen in this instance, but basically the general terms of what's going on is that the songwriter is creating a piece of intellectual property. It's engaging into a business transaction or a partnership with the publisher in which it grants over the rights that are bestowed to them by creating that said piece of intellectual property or a song. And then the publisher then takes that stuff and acts as the songwriter and does business on behalf of the songwriter. In certain instances, or in a variety of instances, they get to participate in the income and potentially the ownership of that copyright. And this lecture is going to talk more about how that transpires and what specifics are going on as it relates to songwriter and publisher agreements. So what does an actual songwriter agreement accomplish? Well, frankly, I'm glad that you asked. And there's three main things that a songwriter agreement should accomplish. Let's take a look at them now. The first thing is that it establishes the basic relationship between the songwriter and the publisher. Who are these entities? Where do they reside? What's the address? What's the date of that particular agreement? But basically laying out who is engaging in this particular agreement. The next thing is that it assigns control over most issues involving the copyrights to the publisher, subject to certain areas of control being retained by the songwriter. Now, if you remember in our synchronization lecture, we started to talk about approvals that are granted by the songwriter. Now, this is more specifically what they're talking about. However, in the agreement, what is actually happening is I'm saying as the songwriter, I'm granting to the publisher my triple DRP for all of the songs that are entailed in this specific agreement, for all the songs that are encompassed within the specific agreement. So I'm assigning control. And the last one is that it determines the allocations of royalties earned by the work. What this is actually referring to is what type of deal structure are we going into as songwriter and publisher, and how are we splitting the ownership and the royalty allocation of these songs. Now, with that in mind, I want to talk about what some of the primary responsibilities of a publisher would be. Now, remember, it's totally possible and plausible, and now becoming more common for you yourself to be your own self-administered publisher. However, traditionally speaking, the vast majority of songwriters have a publisher acting on their behalf because the publisher takes care of a variety of responsibilities on behalf of the songwriter. Here's a list of those responsibilities. The first thing is that they would have to register the songs with the U.S. Copyright Office, with performing rights organizations, and if they're affiliated, the Harry Fox Agency. The second one is that they would receive requests and negotiate licenses for songs. Next, they would collect royalties from all uses and pay the writer and or co-publishers their allocated share. They're going to protect copyrights against infringements, including litigation, meaning going to court and litigating on behalf of the songwriter. And they're going to engage foreign sub-publishers on behalf of the songwriter. Now, the first and foremost responsibility of registering songs with the U.S. Copyright Office, PROs, HFA, etc., is incredibly important. That A starts to register and put the most ironclad protection for that particular song that we have here in the States, which is registering that song with the U.S. Copyright Office. The next is registering it with PROs and HFA. And if you remember our identification process that happened in the synchronization lecture, the first and primary responsibility of you as a songwriter is to be found so that you can have your copyright exploited and earn revenue from your intellectual property. This all goes back, again, to Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts, because you're securing for a limited time to authors and inventors their exclusive rights. But if I can't find you, I can't contact you, I therefore can't request a license from you, the whole intent of the copyright is void, and you're not really generating any revenue off the songs or the intellectual property that you are creating. So registration is huge. Receiving requests, administering the license, and then collecting the revenue generated from that license would, to me, seem to be a very obvious thing that a publisher should be doing. But those are the primary responsibilities of what a publisher should be doing. The next thing is, if there is infringement, we're going to protect it. We've talked about all of those things in both the defense of fair use, how we would prove illegal copying, all the way back in our copyrights basics lecture. So if you need to do that, go back and review either the text or those videos. And then engaging foreign sub-publishers. These are instances in which your song is gaining popularity or generating revenue in foreign territories. We have reciprocity in the Burn and the Beam Convention that say 126 countries have similar-ish copyright laws, and we'll respect them here in the US as long as they're respected abroad. And because of that, I can still generate revenue off of my intellectual property being exploited in foreign territories. And so a publisher engaging with the foreign sub-publisher is crucial so that I can be able to collect the royalties that are owed to me in Vietnam, the Philippines, in Germany, in Japan, and wherever it is. Those things are really important. And believe it or not, there's actually a decent amount of artists that are more popular abroad than they are domestically. So engaging a foreign sub-publisher is crucial. This begs kind of what I think would be an extension of this conversation, which is what are the different types of departments that are embedded in a publisher? I think this is really important to kind of understand how a publisher functions and what's going on the inside so we can better understand the benefit that they would be able to confer to potential songwriters that they sign. So let's take a look at some of these departments. I'll give you a brief explanation on each of them. So the creative department is really the ones that are finding talent, finding songwriters, more like A&Rs at record labels, and trying to sign those specific songwriters to their publishing company. The next one would be a promotions department, which would take and kind of package some of these newer songs, pieces of intellectual property, and sell them to potential vendors. In this instance, that would be, movie theaters, TV productions, movie producers, TV productions, A&R heads at labels, trying to say, we have these songs that you could record and or use in your productions, and you should come to us for those things. So typical marketing or promotions for a different business, but this time we're selling songs. Business and legal affairs handles not only the contractual obligations of what a publisher would be doing in signing deals, but also administering those deals across here in the US and abroad. Synchronization and mechanical licensing department are doing exactly what you would think they would do. They're administering the licenses of synchronization and mechanicals. There's also performance components to this as well. The finance department. Finance department is really kind of your central accounting services. Those are the individuals that are doing reconciliations, doing the P&Ls, cash flows, balance sheets. At the end of the quarter, they're balancing the books. They're making sure that the financials are taken care of. So these are more the accounting side of the publishing department, not the royalty side. We'll talk about that in a second. Copyright department is responsible for registering and or administering the copyrights for, the things that we talked about in the registration aspect in the first responsibility. Foreign department, hopefully, is self-explanatory. And then royalty department. Now, the royalty department is receiving the revenue from all different types of income sources. So performance, mechanical, and synchronization. They're analyzing the accompanying statements to make sure that what we're being paid for is represented and allocated appropriately on the statements that we receive. So they're reconciling payments and statements. They're also applying those payments to any outstanding advances paid to songwriters. And they're then going to turn around and say, I have a payable balance for this songwriter, or I don't. They still need to recoup the advance that we've given them so far. Royalty department would then transmit that information to the finance department. Finance department would cut the actual checks and pay the songwriters and co-publishers where appropriate. Finance department also, backing up just slightly, would be cutting advances or any subsequent payments that are due to songwriters and co-publishers based off of the information that happens from business and legal affairs and allocating what the advances were negotiated for, and the royalty department. IT and computer department, well, these nerds are usually there to network printers and different types of, T1 lines, all these different things. But they're also, especially today, becoming more and more important in doing batch job allocation. So how can we run statements and ACH payments for hundreds of thousands of songwriters and songs? And more specifically for out-facing databases or interfaces so that clients or potential clients can come in and search the database of songs, start to ask questions about them and see, well, let's say Teegarden Tunes has all of these types of songs, but I need to be able to search them and see what type of information is relevant to them so I could potentially license them for my production. We'll talk more about this when we get into pitching and placement in music libraries, but this is another function of what the IT computer department would be doing, putting together out-facing web databases so that I can search them and then potentially go back to the sync or mechanical licensing department and say, I'd like to use/license this particular song.